Welcome, everyone, to the opening ceremony of the 2021 Inspiring Role Models Virtual Conference. As high school students ourselves, we understand the fear of the unknown and the overwhelming pressure of entering the so-called real world.
With that said, as adolescents strive to develop a sense of identity and purpose, role models become important in helping identify the behaviors, attitudes, and qualities that make up an impactful leader.
For me, stories and storytelling has been a bridge to help get people in the room, help people feel engaged, help them see that they have their own real-world superpower. Life is hard. The world isn't easy, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't show up. As you go about this conference, as you think about the impact you're making, I hope you'll think about your superpower and who you could share it with.
Now the question is, what should I post about? I get this from students all the time. Public speaking is useful literally everywhere. Class presentations, especially when you've forgotten your script. Interviews, running an organization, leading a meeting, or ordering at a restaurant.
If you're doing what you love and you get paid for it, to me, that is a win-win-win. My last piece of advice is just get started today, because entrepreneurship, it looks so different for everyone. There's no clear road, there's no clear path, so you have to make your own way. This has never been done before.
So what are the problems we're trying to solve over at Emerging Works? Job opportunity. One of the biggest problems contributing to mass incarceration is recidivism. I am a firm believer that technology can equal liberation, because provided the right opportunity, lives are going to be changed. And I know that because my life was changed. My life was changed. My life was changed.
As I've been talking about, technical education isn't accessible to everyone. It should be, but it isn't. Learning is just such a beautiful thing, and for us, it all probably looks different. Some of you may be artists, and you learn your craft. Some of you may be future engineers or present engineers. There is so much for all of us to learn.
And then, this whole talk is hopefully going to give you an idea of what you can do instead to really build for longevity, to do what you love. And I do want to emphasize, don't be reluctant to apply, because you won't have experience until you have experience.
And so this is what our robots at Mobot looks like. 3 years in, it required some courage to just take a look at where I was at the time and figure out, is this really where I want to be? Just because I've been doing the same thing for the last, 5 to 10 years, is that what I want to be doing the next 5 to 10 years?
Think about the subjects in schools that you hate the most. If any of those external incentives were taken away from doing that thing, would you still have any will to learn about it? Would you still learn about it if those things were taken away? I would wager, for the most part, no. This system of reward and punishments creates a huge issue for our curiosity.
We also just want to thank our entire IRM ambassador team. Each and every one of you played a role in the success of this conference, and it was our honor to work with all of you.
In addition to the efforts of our ambassadors, our partners have spent copious time and effort to help this conference reach heights beyond what we could have ever imagined.
So congratulations to all of the winners for our 9 raffle giveaways. Look out for an email from us shortly.
As a student-led youth committee with less than 20 members, we have never undertaken such a project, and I would be lying if I said we weren't overwhelmed in some situations. However, the most significant part of it all is that we didn't give up on ourselves and we didn't cap off our potential. Thank you all for attending the Inspiring Role Models Virtual Conference this weekend. This conference would not have been possible without you, and we hope you leave learning something new about yourself. We hope you feel empowered and, of course, inspired.
Jessica and I were honored to be your host this weekend, and once again, thank you so much to each and every one of you. We hope you enjoyed spending time with us during this conference. And finally, we just hope that all of you have an amazing rest of your day.
All right, everyone. Welcome to our 4th annual NYEB College Seminar. Welcome. My name is Harold Wu. I am a senior, a rising senior at Bloomfield Hills High School, and also a current co-president on NYE's Youth Leadership Committee. Once again, I would like to welcome everyone again to our 4th NYEB College Seminar. NYEB is a website that arose in light of COVID-19. Due to the pandemic, we believe that it is even more important to unite and fight against boredom and academic regression. Therefore, NYEYLC has made it our mission to provide an outlet for creativity, entertainment, and academic achievement, leading to the creation of NYEB. Our website is constantly updated every other week and features new and exciting articles surrounding the topics of eats, arts, giggles, media, self-care, STEM, and study. Basically, you can find whatever you need for entertainment located on our website. MYE stands for Michigan Youth Empowerment Foundation and is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to promoting STEM education and supporting K-12 students so that they can thrive in the new technological world. Before we start tonight, I would like to quickly introduce you all to the Inspiring Role Models Virtual Conference, also known as IRM for short. This conference will be held this year on August 6th to 7th and aims to motivate youth to fully invest in themselves and explore their passions. On the screen, can we move to the next screen? On the next screen, you can see the QR code that will allow you to access our registration page. For those of you who purchase our general free pass, it will allow you to fully view our YouTube Live that will be streamed on our YouTube channel, as well as our VIP pass. Those members will have direct access to the Zoom and will also be able to input questions that will be directly answered by our speakers. So once again, before we get started, the registration page can be found either using the QR code or we have a link posted in the chat for you to use as well. All right, and one last thing, feel free to leave any questions you have in the Q&A box. Our panelists will answer them at the end of the presentation. Before I introduce today's speakers, I would like to say it is my personal honor to host this seminar. And during it, we will be going over the college admissions process, starting with an introduction from our top 3 graduating seniors from the class of 2022. To start us off, let me introduce Jessica Zhang, one of our former co-presidents of NYE's YLC team, and will be attending the University of Michigan with LSA honors and a major in computer science. Please join me in welcoming Jessica.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica, and I attended the International Academy Okema campus in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan as my high school. As Harold mentioned beforehand, I will be attending the University of Michigan in the fall. I was admitted into LSA honors, and I will be pursuing a major in computer science. So to get things started off, I'm going to go ahead and introduce some of my extracurriculars that I participated throughout my high school career. So my first main school club that I participated in was Key Club, and this was a club focused around leadership, service, and general community involvement. I started out as manager and I ended out as president. I also participated in National Honor Society and French Honor Society, both of which are focused more so on the academic side of things. So ranging from tutoring to hosting events, some subject-based, some not. In terms of sports, I participated in junior varsity volleyball, as well as varsity tennis at Rochester High School. I participated in sports for 4 years, so I was a scholar athlete for all 4 years due to participating and maintaining high grades. And I also participated in a research internship at the University of Michigan under Professor Liu from the engineering department. And this was a wonderful opportunity for me because the University of Michigan had always been a dream school of mine. And I knew that I wanted to have the opportunity to be able to get on the inner side of things and experience more of the intellectual curiosity that comes with college. And having this research opportunity, it was a great opportunity to get a kind of like a sneak peek into it before the college life started. So this was awesome. I was able to work with a group of PhD students alongside the professor to publish a paper and video to the Journal of Visual Experiments, sorry. And it was a great experience overall. In terms of work, I was both a Kumon teacher and a private tutor. And one of my main extracurriculars, just in all that I participated in, was at Michigan Youth Empowerment Foundation. So in terms of awards, I earned the President's Volunteer Service Award from MYU here, the gold level in both 2020 and 2021. I was also the co-president of MYE's Youth Leadership Committee alongside Angela. And we organized a plethora of events, ranging from the Inspiring Role Models virtual conference last year, which was a blast, as well as facilitating things regarding to MYE Beat, and lots of different activities in addition to those. And lastly, I was a teacher for MYE's elementary writing class.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jessica, for the brief introduction. Next up, we have Angela Xu, another former co-president of MYE's YLC team, who will be attending the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business this coming fall. Once again, please join me to welcome Angela.
Thank you, Harold, for the wonderful introduction. I'm so excited to be here tonight. So I attended Troy High School, and like Harold said, I'll be going to the University of Pennsylvania next year to study business. So now I'll talk a little bit about the extracurriculars that I did, starting with Michigan Youth Empowerment. So the first extracurricular that I listed on my college application was actually being co-president of the Youth Leadership Committee with Jessica. So like she said, we did tons of community service work, especially stuff related to both STEM and leadership. But my favorite memory would definitely be organizing the Inspiring Role Models Conference with Jessica. So Harold talked about this earlier, but if you are available, I would definitely recommend attending this year if you had the chance. It was so much fun organizing and just listening to all the speakers. So after this conference, if you haven't done so already, definitely register for that. Outside of the Youth Leadership Committee, I also participated in Make X Spark. This was a robotics competition for elementary and middle school students where they kind of presented a challenge and they had to design a product. So sort of like a mini make-a-thon. And my role was kind of just teaching all of these students all the skills they needed and helping them prepare their projects and their pitches. This kind of combined both leadership, STEM, and entrepreneurship. And then finally, outside of that, I also taught robotics and programming courses at MYE. And outside of MYE, my two main other extracurriculars were my independent research, as well as being on the executive team for an organization called Girls for Business. So starting with my research, this was kind of a personal project that I started the summer before my junior year. And I did this up until the summer before my senior year. And I researched cardiovascular monitoring devices, and I was also able to compete in ISEF. This stands for International Science and Engineering Fair. And then this summer, I was also able to publish a research paper. So that was super fun. For Girls for Business, this is an international nonprofit that's dedicated to supporting business education for girls around the world. And my specific role was organizing and leading a free mentorship program. So this allowed me to talk about both the major that I applied as well as just more social impact work, which was a really big part of my application. I also tutored and did Chinese dance. And then finally in school, I'll talk a lot about these clubs later on, but just a brief overview. I did She's the First, which is a women's empowerment club. DECA is a business competition club, and the National Chinese Honor Society is just tutoring students who are taking Chinese courses. So I would say my activities weren't like exclusively in the business, I guess field, even though I was applying as a business major. I was kind of split between STEM, business, and social impact. And that's kind of one of the main reasons that I chose the University of Pennsylvania, because of how interdisciplinary their curriculum was.
All right, thank you so much, Angela. And finally, we have Jeffrey Liu, one of our former MYE members, along with being one of our teachers on MYE's team. He is attending the University of British Columbia's Facility of Arts, pursuing cognitive systems in the fall. For one final time, please welcome Jeffrey.
All right, hey guys, and thank you, Harold, for the introduction. I decided to format my intro here just like it is listed on the comment app. There are a few things left out, but I left the most significant things in here. So as for honors, I was a National Merit Scholarship Commended Scholar. That is for the PSAT score. I was an AP Scholar with distinction, which meant that I took a certain amount of AP classes and scored well on them. I was a scholar athlete at Adams High for the 3 years that I did athletics. As far as activities go, I was a teacher for NYE's Tinkercad classes, which was a splendid opportunity and allowed me to really develop my patience while also being a great activity to write about on my college apps. I was a patrol leader for the Boy Scouts of America Troop 123. I was a varsity ski racer for Adams, co-founder of the Adams Spikeball Club, and I was a photo video team leader for the AdamBots robotics team. That's FRC, of course, Adams once again. And I also received the President's Volunteer Service Awards, gold and silver, respectively.
All right. Thank you three for the amazing introductions. So let's jump directly into tonight's seminar. So the first topic we want to talk about is college applications and the importance of it. So as you guys all may understand or know, college applications is very important for all high schoolers, and at some point you will all undergo through it. So some questions I have is, how would you kind of prepare throughout high school, and what examples do you guys have for clubs that you took in school for our audience to kind of gain an understanding on? So let's start with Jessica.
All right, so let's start off with our school clubs. And I have them listed in kind of chronological order of when I joined them. So starting off with what's first on the list, I joined PAWS 9th through 12th grade. And PAWS was focused on animal activism, and it was mainly just something that I took interest in, something that I really enjoyed, something alongside that was fun. And I ended up as president of the club, but I did not write it on my common application, so it was not submitted to colleges because it was mainly something that I wanted to keep to myself as just a fun activity that I took part in. Now, my second main school club, so this is the one I focused on largely in my college applications, was Key Club. And now I prefaced this beforehand, but Key Club is basically a high school organization, the oldest in the country, that focuses on service, leadership, and just community development and engagement. So this was one of the main things that I tied into pertaining to school clubs. And I started out as manager and ended up as president. And it was a wonderful experience for me being able to engage in projects and activities that really meant a lot to me and help in the development of my community. And then next off, I also participated in Asian Student Association. Now, Asian Student Association just focuses really on Asian culture. It was also something that I just took interest in as like a personal interest, not really academic related. That was 9th through 12th grade as well. And in terms of academic focuses, I was also a part of chemistry club. This was junior and senior year, and it's really a club focused on tutoring and just setting up resources for students. So that was also a great chance for not only me to study chemistry, but help others who may be struggling in different areas than I am. And then finally, I also participated in National Honor Society and French Honor Society junior and senior year. These were also academic based, really on tutoring, study resources, etc., and just being able to provide support to my fellow classmates. And in terms of the time commitments for each of these clubs, I would say that the more laid back clubs that I did just for my fun and personal interest, so that includes PAWS and Asian Student Association, really took less than an hour every single week. Key Club, which is my main club, took anywhere from like 2 to 4 hours every week. So definitely a bigger commitment, especially taking on leadership roles in addition to that. And then these academic clubs of Chemistry Club, National Honor Society, and French Honor Society, they could take anywhere between 1 to 2 hours respectively, depending on if tests were coming up and who needed help. So yeah, and I'll pass it on to Jeffrey.
All right, so as for me, my first club that I joined in high school was Eco Club, which is a club focused on helping out the environment in your own school. So we would talk about recycling in our school, what the lunch line would use for utensils and all that to try and be more sustainable. It was mostly a fun over rigor sort of club where I spent probably 1 hour a week maximum, but it also provided a lot of volunteer opportunities, which was very helpful for the PVSA award, that being the President's Volunteer Service Award. After that, I moved on to the Stock Trading Club. And that is a club that I helped get off the ground. It was started by one of my friends. So I helped out the officers with creating the club itself and also creating the presentations each week for the stock picks. And that led to the creation of Spikeball Club, because I could use the information that I had from there to transfer to also co-founding that Spikeball Club. And that happened our senior year. And it was the biggest club in the school. So getting it off the ground was just the most difficult portion. After that, it was playing spikeball, right? And for you guys who don't know, spikeball is it's a pseudo sport. It's almost like volleyball, except the net is on the ground. You're bouncing a ball off a net. Not really significant part of the presentation, but the point is that I did get that off the ground and was able to be listed as a co-founder for that. Now, for the Stock Trading Club and the Spikeball Club commitments, the big part is just getting it off the ground. After that, it is probably 2 to 3 hours a week maximum. So it was quite manageable.
And then for me, like Jessica, I didn't include all of these clubs in my actual college application, but I'll go down the list and kind of explain the main points I have for each. So Model United Nations, I did from 9th grade to 11th grade. This is a pretty popular club. So most schools will usually have some sort of team like this, but this was definitely the most time-consuming club I did. I remember when we used to have competitions coming up, just researching and prepping for the competition would take anywhere between 4 to 6 hours. And then competition would often start Thursday night and go all the way to Sunday. So it was a lot of, we had to miss school, but also make up all of that homework. So it was very time consuming. And that's probably the main reason why I chose to discontinue Model UN in 12th grade. I didn't have a leadership position either in Model United Nations. So I felt that there wasn't a lot that I could show regarding my impact in the club. And I really wanted to take the time that I had spent previous years in Model UN on something else, such as working on my college applications. But that's not to say I didn't love this club a lot. I would definitely recommend it to anyone who wants to work on their public speaking or their research skills. So my next two clubs are Project Lead, SAD, and NCHS. And none of these were that time consuming. I would say like combined, they took up like 1 hour of my time per week. Project Lead was a community service club. So I basically only did this for Presidential Volunteer Service Awards. And then I was fundraising chair in 12th grade. So I just organized a few fundraisers for the school. And then SAD stands for Students Against Destructive Decisions. This is more advocacy work. And then we just had a few meetings per year. And then finally, NCHS, like I said earlier, is National Chinese Honor Society. So the last two clubs that I listed, these are actually the only two that I actually talked about in the application for college. First is She's the First. I did this from 10th grade to 12th grade. This is definitely one of my favorite clubs that I've ever done. It's a social impact club. So our mission was fundraising to support girls' education in low-income countries. And I talked a lot about this because it was kind of related to one of the themes in my application, which was social impact, specifically focusing on women's empowerment. And then as PR officer in 12th grade, that was about 2 hours per week. And then finally, DECA, I was an executive council member. And then this is also my competition-based club, as well as the only club I had that was related to my major, because this was a business-related club. And this is about 1 or 2 hours per week. And then now I'll kind of jump into a few of the general advice things that the three of us had. So first is quality over quantity. I would say that it's better to do less clubs and really focus on the ones that matter to you. So for me personally, I started out with a ton of clubs, but in my application, I only, like I said before, I only focused on She's the First and DECA. And that's because what I realized is that when I was being involved in tons of clubs, it was a lot more difficult to really stand out and make an impact in each individual one. So my tip for you guys is definitely join and try out a ton of clubs in 9th grade, because this is really your chance to experience anything that you want. But once you get into 10th grade, try to narrow down the number of clubs that you're in to the ones that you're truly interested in, so you can really focus on making an impact in there and then hopefully getting a leadership position in junior or senior year. Our next piece of advice would be finding a balance between the type of club you're joining. So that would be competition-based clubs, service-oriented clubs, or a subject-specific club. So the main reason for this is time commitment. I would say that competition clubs will usually be the ones that take up the most of your time, not only just preparing and researching for these clubs, but also going and traveling to these competitions themselves. So I don't recommend doing only competition-based clubs because you're not going to have a lot of time to really focus on them and actually do well in them. So that's why I would say try to diversify the type of club that you're in. And then finally, the last piece of advice is that your impact matters a lot more than your title or position. So for example, I was president of SAD, or Students Against Destructive Decisions, but I basically did nothing as president. All we did was host a few small meetings. So looking back, when it was time to write my college applications, I realized that there wasn't a lot I could write about for SAD, even though I had a pretty prestigious title as president. But comparing that to She's the First, for She's the First, I didn't get a leadership position until 12th grade. So the stuff that I talked about in my application was stuff I did as a member in 11th grade. But despite that, I chose to talk about She's the First over SAD in my application because I thought the stuff I did as a member was a lot more impressive. And that's why I would say your impact matters a lot more than the position you have in your clubs.
Yeah, so in addition to the advice that we're going to give you guys for clubs, we also just wanted to highlight some of the important extracurriculars that we did outside of school. So starting off with the list that we compiled there, my very first activity highlight that's outside of school was MYE in the Youth Leadership Committee. This was the very first activity that I listed on my common application that was submitted to colleges. So for Youth Leadership Committee, like I mentioned in our beginning introductions, Angela and I as co-presidents organized a lot of events, just to reiterate, stuff like Inspiring Role Models Virtual Conference and facilitating myebeat.com. So there was just a lot of passion and dedication that went into these activities. And it gave us a lot of material to work with in our college applications. And we were able to really express ourselves through this activity, which was significantly important for me and my application. And in addition to participating in YLC, I also taught the elementary writing class at MYE. And yeah, so that's for MYE. For my second bullet here, I have just an overall theme in my application, which was my focus on teaching and tutoring. In my activities list, I had a lot that was pertaining to this theme. For example, I had Kumon, private tutoring, National Honor Society, French Honor Society, all things pertaining to helping fellow students or younger children and spreading the gifts of education and being able to dedicate my time to these manners, which I expressed in my application to matter a lot to me. And my third point here is another theme that I had ongoing, which was focus on exploration and curiosity. I found that curiosity is a big thing that colleges look out for when they're looking at different applicants. And in my activities list, one of the things was the University of Michigan research internship, which of course, research entails that exploration into boundaries of knowledge that have yet to be set. So being able to engage in this and have fun and be able to stretch my intellectual ability was really important for me and something that I also accentuated in my application. And in addition to that, I also, this was mainly for essays, talked about my internal assessments and extended essay. Now, those words may sound foreign to many of you, but they're related to the International Baccalaureate or IB curriculum in the International Academy. So I'll talk more about that later. But basically, I was able to leverage these research papers, internal assessment and extended essay, as a kind of independent research activity that I was able to accomplish on my own time, in addition to working towards my high school diploma.
So my big activity was teaching Tinkercad at MYE. I did have other extracurriculars. the Boy Scouts of America patrol leader, and as well as other work opportunities I had. But this is the big one where I really wrote about it and doubled down on it in my application, because it was a great way to emphasize my profile in my essay, which had already talked about networking and personal connection. And I could tie that in really easily with teaching, because this was this unique experience that a lot of other students did not have. And I got to watch my students grow, really connect with them. And it really allowed me to grow as a person as well. And I also did have, and we're going to talk about this later, but just taking the wide range of classes I took, extracurriculars that they don't necessarily match up, like some are STEM, some are teaching, some is this, some is that. My UBC application that had a question that allowed me to highlight how important novel experiences were to me, exploring new experiences essentially, so that it allowed me to put together a more concise application, because otherwise it looks like a bit of a mishmash. And that is also something I touched on my personal essay as well.
And then for me, the main theme in my application would be, I guess two themes, women's empowerment and then education, specifically making it more accessible. So I'll kind of go through the list of my activities and talk about how I was able to group them into these themes and craft like that story within my application. So starting with MYE, this was definitely a lot more focused on education. So with YLC, we did a lot of events such as IRM, helping youth around the world learn about STEM and business opportunities, Make It Spark, as well as just teaching in general. Obviously, that's just teaching students. And then outside of MIE, I did tons of social equity work that focused a lot on women's empowerment. So I mentioned Girls for Business earlier, and then in school, I had She's the First. And then I was also tutoring at a women's-led tutoring organization in Detroit. So I was able to group all of that into women's empowerment. And then finally, third, one of my main activities was my STEM research. And because I was applying to schools, or at least most schools, as a business major, I kind of related my research into entrepreneurship and innovation. So I phrased it as talking about how I was using engineering to create a business idea. And then I also just wanted to share like an important tip regarding time management, because I know that's a lot, at least when I was entering high school, that was a big thing that I was concerned about. And the thing I realized is that you don't have to pursue all of your extracurriculars the entire year. So you can definitely take advantage of summers as well, because colleges like to see that you're making the most of your time. So in the summer, whether you're pursuing a personal project, getting a job, or taking classes, all of that's really great, and admissions officers love to see that. So for example, Jessica and I organized Inspiring Role Models the conference. In the summer, I did the majority of my research in the summer, and then I also participated in a business summer program. So that's just something you can keep in mind. If you don't think you can handle clubs, sports, and extracurriculars throughout the entire school year, you don't have to do that. You can definitely take the time during the summer to find some activities to put on your college application as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the advice and information, Angela, Jessica, and of course, Jeffrey. I personally found all of it to be very interesting. So moving on to our next topic, let's continue on to AP and IB courses. This topic will be especially important for our 10th and 11th grade audience, as these are the 2 years you should be considering taking a look at these courses and whether or not your school offers them.
Okay, so you may be wondering the difference between AP and IB programs. And I just want to preface this by saying you're not going to be at a significant disadvantage if you decide to pick one over the other. They're still very similar. They have their ups and their downs, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. All right, so APs is going to be more of your standard curriculum. You'll see a lot of schools that are on that standard curriculum. They'll offer a number of AP classes, which allow you to get college credit. If you guys are looking to take a class, I would highly recommend you guys do load up on these AP classes, because it does boost your GPA. So with AP classes, you get the option to change your GPA to be a weighted GPA, and that is out of a 5.0 scale instead of a 4.0 scale, meaning that your numbers coming out on the other end are going to be more impressive. Now, It is going to be more rigorous. It is going to be more difficult than your regular classes, sure. But for a lot of people, it is going to be worth it. It's a lot of memorization. It's usually not a lot of really mental prowess. It's just flashcards and doing online tests and all that. So it's very studyable. It's not as difficult as it may seem coming into it. I know, to me, AP classes were pitched like they're this big monster of class, and you'd have to read all these textbooks and do all this, do all that. Really, it's going to be Quizlet, right? So I'm sure you guys have used that online flashcard program for a little bit. AP is going to be mostly that. And also the exams, the AP exams are optional if you're looking to take an AP class, but you're stressed out thinking that you got to take this exam by the end of the year, and oh, you're taking X amount of AP classes. Now you got to take X amount of exams. I don't know if I could do that. It's not necessary, okay? In fact, it can be recommended against because sometimes you do load up on that stress at the end of the year. So some of the exams you don't want to take. As long as you're taking those classes, you don't have to take the exam, you are going to get that GPA boost with the weighted GPA. Now, the exams are out of 1 through 5. 5 is the highest score you can score, period, but that is extremely difficult to achieve. Most students end up at around a 3, and if you study a fair bit, you're going to get a 4 usually relatively easily. Of course, this isn't going to be easy per se, but again, this is made out to be very difficult, while usually it is just a game of repetition and trying to get these concepts into your head through flashcards and all that. If you do score high enough on your exams, depending on your college or university, you can receive college credit. Now, for some Ivies, I know that they are just not taking APs, period. So this is something that you would have to look into per school. I know for UBC, if I get a 4 and above on any one of them, then I can skip a certain class that is tied with the AP class that I just took in high school. But depending on your school, it can change for classes per school as well. I know for more difficult classes at U of M, I believe. So for physics, for example, you would have to get a 5, which is the most difficult one. Like I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of studying in order to skip the class tied to it in Michigan.
Yeah, and in comparison to that, we have some information here about IB courses. So I just want to preface this by saying that this is based on my experience at the International Academy, which is an international baccalaureate school, therefore an IB school. And this is going to be some information about DP courses. So anybody who is looking to take or attend a international baccalaureate school, this information would be for you. Now, throughout your high school experience, your freshman and sophomore year at an IB school, you'll be taking middle years program classes. So your diploma program classes typically begin in your junior and senior year, unless you're in higher level math, which I'll talk about on the next slide. So for the entire point of diploma program courses, it's basically to achieve your IB diploma. Now, this is different from your high school diploma. It's kind of something on the side that you're working to achieve alongside your typical high school education. And it's something that's renowned and honored around the world. Now, I will mention one thing, that for DP courses, because they are so in-depth, and IB high schools or tend to be much smaller than your typical public AP high schools, there's a smaller course variety than AP, at least what I've seen at the International Academy. But like I mentioned before, there's going to be much more in-depth course content, and you're going to gain a lot more knowledge from that class. Now, college credit is also offered through your DP courses, but they are offered through your higher level DP courses. So in the beginning of your senior year of high school, so this is a while later for many of you, but you will be choosing which courses you want to take at that higher level out of your 6 diploma program classes that you're currently taking. You can choose 3 higher level courses or 4 higher level courses, and then the other 2 or 3 would be standard level. And basically, come the end of your senior year, you're going to be taking IB exams. So this would be like, the adjacent to your AP exams. but they're scored from 1 to 7. And of course, your score determines what you'll be receiving for college credit alongside what college you'll be attending. So for example, at U of M, in order to test out of a given math class, you need to receive a 6 or a 7 on your IB exam for a higher level math. And like AP, a 7 or the highest on the scale is incredibly hard to achieve. Now, next point here is that your IB courses or your DP courses are going to contain a lot of exposure to research, independent exploration, and academic writing. Now, this ties into the internal assessments and extended essay that I mentioned beforehand. So these are all independent research projects or papers that you write pertaining to any area of interest that you have for a given subject. So for example, for my chemistry internal assessment, I conducted my own chemical experiments, investigating titrations, rate of reactions, and that was what I found interesting, and I ended up writing my research paper or internal assessment on that. So in addition to that, your extended essay is going to be just kind of a bigger version of that. It's like a bigger research project, but it's also, you get to choose your research topic, but this time you also get to choose whatever subject you'd like to write it on, but for your internal assessments, they're assigned to given subjects. And in addition to that, the IB also really makes an effort to teach you how to think. So it's not going to be a bunch of memorization. It's going to be developing those analytical and critical thinking skills, which is really, really helpful because that's what makes a lot of people or that have experience with the IB program say that the IB program kind of mimics a thought process that you're going to see a lot more in college. And for example, there are special courses that you have to take through the IB, such as the theory of knowledge, which really learns to exercise those different perspectives and practicing holistic thinking. There's also an effort to accentuate balance in your life. So you have your creativity, activity, and service kind of requirement for the IB diploma, which is CAS. And it's basically where you log your hours in each of those given areas to make sure that you maintain that structure in your life. And then I want to tie that all up with saying that I really love the IB diploma, not the IB diploma, the IB program and DP courses, because it really did teach me how to exercise my thinking abilities. And I know that's all a lot of information to take in and pertaining to what it is. So if you guys have any questions on that, feel free to ask.
Okay, so now we'll get into specifically the courses that we took in high school. I was pretty lucky that Troy High, the school that I went to, was pretty flexible about when and how many APs that you take. But I know other public schools or just schools in general will have like restrictions on, oh, you can't take AP or advanced courses until like 11th or 12th grade. So that'll depend on your school. But for me, I just left my overview on the screen and then I'll kind of go through the main points. So in 9th grade, I took one AP class in school, and then I also self-studied the AP Chinese exam. So I ended up taking 2 exams that year. 10th and 11th grade, most of our exams are online. So that's just something to keep in mind. The structures for both the class and the exam were a bit different for both those 2 years. And then finally this year, I took 5 APs just like junior year, but I only ended up taking exams for 2 of them.
Okay, so for me, Adams High did not offer any AP classes for freshman year, so there were none I could take. Sophomore year, there was 2 available, so I took one of the 2. Junior year, I had 4 APs, and then senior year, I followed that up with the same amount. And for those of you who are curious as to how many AP classes you should be taking, I can't say for sure. You'll learn your limit as you take them. But for me, I found that 4 AP classes were pretty manageable. It got a little stressful at times, but for the most part, it didn't seem as bad as it sounds. And I took the exams for all 4 of them both years, which again, had me peeved a bit at the end of the year that I did decide to take them all, but I don't regret it looking back.
And then for me, obviously, it's a bit different because I attended an IB school. But like I mentioned before, my freshman and sophomore year were focused around NYP courses. And I took 7 and then 6 in 10th grade. In 10th grade, I would have taken 7 if not for me being placed in higher level math, which is something that's decided before you enter the IB school. And because of that, I took math with the juniors sophomore year, which is why I have that one DP class instead of 7 MYPs. And then respectively, junior and senior year, I took 6 DPs each. And now it looks like a higher number of courses, but really this is something that's typical of an IB student. And it's really just based on how the IB curriculum is structured. So this is what you'll see more or less.
Now, one other type of course that we haven't mentioned yet is something called dual enrollment. So this is something where you'll be taking college courses as a high schooler. So for Troy High, those courses were offered through a community college program. I don't think any one of us took dual enrollment, but if it's something that your school offers, I would definitely consider it because it's just another way to show the colleges that you're applying to how you're challenging yourself in the classroom. So that's definitely something that you can look into.
So time is going to be a very important resource in high school, especially as you move on and you're taking more advanced classes. So time management is going to be something that is very important to learn and develop while you're there. Now, some tips that we have is that you have more time than you may realize. A lot of things will eat up time. You'll find ways to optimize your schedule so that maybe you spend less time watching Netflix and instead doing work. You'll find times here and there where you are spending this time where you can really just get ahead at your classes and be a little less stressed out at the end of the day because you have done more and you are more productive. Planning ahead, having calendars and planners, very, very important to do. I really like to use my reminders app on my iPhone just because throughout the day, you're going to be assigned homework. And I used to think that I could just remember what homework assignments I have and it'd be fine. No, that doesn't work because you'll just, as the day goes on, it'll just slip your mind what you have first hour, what you have second hour, and then you come in next day and lo and behold, you have forgotten an assignment, you have forgotten something that you had to do. So have a calendar, have a planner. Doesn't have to be old school the way that we say planners. You just use it on your phone, set up a Google Calendar, set up the calendar on your phone. All of that would be great to help figure out what you got to do and when you got to do it by. Using class time is also going to be very important. You're going to also have a lot of free time during classes. Again, more free time than you may realize. So look out for it. And when you have that free time, that is a great time to finish homework. I'm telling you, it is prime time to finish homework because when you get home and you have a lot less homework, it is just a lot more satisfying and you can spend your time doing whatever other projects, whatever other assignments you need to do, or even just using that as your own free time, enjoying yourself for a little bit, having done your homework in school. Working with peers, this is something that should come naturally, especially for the more difficult classes. You'll find that a lot of schools or a lot of classes, they will have official or unofficial, they will have group chats, right? So other students are going to help you out with your assignments. If you ever need any help, you're stuck on something, you can usually ask these group chats. If no group chat is created or you aren't joined or you're not joining one of these group chats, feel free to create your own group chat, maybe with just you and a few of your friends, because trust me, if you are struggling, they're going to be struggling too. So working alongside them, that's a win-win, helps you figure out your work and helps you figure out your class as well. And then multitasking. So when you're taking X amount of advanced classes, you are going to have to multitask. You're going to have to prioritize, figure out what is most important, what is going to take up most of your time, and then focus on that, and then focus on the next thing, and then do the next thing. It's, again, a skill that's going to be developed as you go on throughout high school, but it is going to be something where you're really going to have to keep up because you're going to have a lot to keep up with.
Yeah, definitely. And next we have another point here, which is you must be aware of your time commitment for your activities because that's going to allow you to plan around things much more easily. And I noticed this question in the chat here, which has to do with varsity sports. And yes, sports are huge time commitments. It's really often that you're going to have practices for like 2 to 3 hours and then games on weekdays that end around 8 or 10. and then an entire tournament on Saturday. Like, it's a lot, definitely. But nonetheless, I would say that it's a wonderful opportunity for growth, and college admissions officers recognize that it's a huge time commitment, and they definitely do honor that and appreciate that. So nonetheless, be sure to beware of that time commitment. And as long as you're able to organize everything properly, it shouldn't be too big of an issue. Because for me personally, I did tennis the second semester of my junior year, which is notoriously known as a really busy time. And varsity tennis was a lot of fun for me. It was actually a great opportunity for me to de-stress, as well as just kind of take care of everything alongside it through proper time management. And like Jeffrey said, that can be done through calendars, planners, knowing all your game days, inputting them into your calendar, and just being able to properly determine and deduce when to work on big projects in accordance with everything, or just smaller tasks in general. Now, in addition to that, leadership positions are also going to be a big time commitment. For Angela and I, when we worked on IRM as co-presidents of the Youth Leadership Committee, it was a lot. There was a lot that needed to be taken care of. And as a leader, you are responsible for this team, and you're responsible for taking charge. And what comes with that is, of course, a lot of time and effort that needs to be put into all of these projects and activities that you're organizing. So knowing that ahead of time, and maybe being able to prioritize and organize everything in a way that makes sense for you, while still maintaining that sense of responsibility, is definitely something to look out for and pay attention to.
And finally, we just wanted to end this topic with some tips for being productive in general. And my biggest piece of advice would probably just be figuring out what time of the day that you work best in. So for example, I figured out that I work better late at night. So my mom's not a really big fan of this, but I figured out that I'm going to be a lot more focused and work a lot better, usually around like after 8 p.m. So I'll try to save my more important or time consuming tasks for then. So for example, that could be like studying for an exam in one of my harder classes, writing an essay during research, things like that. So earlier in the day, around like after school, like 3 to 4 p.m., I'll do the things that take up less energy. So that'll be like completing vocab or just doing work for an easier class. And then later at night, that's when I'll save the tasks that will be a lot more time consuming. So that's just what works best for me.
And then we also want to make some few quick notes on personal growth here. So in general, high school is going to be a big time for growing and being able to develop your character. So knowing that, we have realized that our 9th grade selves look a lot different than what we are and who we are now. So everyone grows and learns at their own pace. So this is definitely not going to look like your journey. Like, our journeys aren't going to be the same as yours. But we just wanted to take a few moments to introduce how we have grown. And for me personally, I just wanted to do like a brief overview that going into high school from 8th grade, since I decided to attend the International Academy, which is outside of my traditional path for your public school system, I entered into high school without any of my middle school friends. So it was just a completely new environment for me. And I was incredibly timid in 8th grade. So going into this was a big, like, scary thing. And being able to experience that scariness, though, was really, really beneficial to me, because I learned how to open up and interact with people, build connections, which ended up being huge for me in developing my social skills and etc. So in addition to that, participating in the Youth Leadership Committee and eventually leading it with Angela was also a huge opportunity for growth, because not only did it take a bunch of time management, it took a bunch of dedication and passion, but it really allowed me to discover a lot of things that I found true interest in. And being able to work with such an amazing team was also huge, and allowing me to just kind of experience what can really be accomplished by a group of dedicated individuals. And finally, I also found a lot of just growth through sports, because sports involve a lot of persistence and perseverance. So knowing that and going into that with that mentality was huge for me and allowing me to develop those characteristics.
So whether you like it or not, guys, you're going to end up developing and learning stuff throughout high school. Uh, you're going to learn a lot of lessons the hard way, even though we're trying to save you guys from that right now. It's going to happen. It's almost inevitable. As for me, going into high school, I was dead scared. I didn't join any athletics freshman year. The entire idea just scared me too much. I was interested, but no, I couldn't do it. And I was just a lot less initiative than I really would have liked to have been. But that's something that obviously I picked up on, and you just pick yourself up and say, hey, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to step forward, and you got to take these opportunities, even when it's not as obvious. You want to figure out what you want to do too. I know going into high school, I had this mindset that I was definitely going to do something in engineering. It was my passion, it was everything, it was my calling, except obviously that's not what I'm going to UBC for. So that's changed as well. I've realized that my interests changed throughout high school. I've taken different classes is also something that has been big. Is I've taken actually AP psychology was a big class where I took it as a GPA booster, but then realized that the topic at hand was actually quite interesting to me, and that maybe this path that I had set for myself wasn't gonna be the right path for me. So I changed out of that, really took more initiative and all of that. Another thing you're gonna pick up on is time management and prioritizing. Okay, so I know we just talked about time management and prioritizing, but this is something where when you go into freshman year, you're gonna think you're good enough, you're gonna think you got it all down, and lo and behold, everything comes on top of you, and projects start piling up, homework starts piling up. You got a lot of stuff you need to do, and until you learn all this prioritizing skills, all this time management skills, it is just going to be head under the water. But you will learn as you go, and things will get easier. It's not going to be super difficult. All right. If you feel like you genuinely are drowning, then that means you have found your limit, and that maybe it's time to step back a little bit. But it's also important to respect those limits and understand what you are capable of and where you should really draw the line, because you want to get out on the other side. Okay. All right. You want to be fine when you end up graduating. So make sure that you are taking good care of yourselves.
And then for me, mainly in ninth grade, I was basically just doing all the clubs that everyone else is joining, because my parents just said you need to join clubs. And I really know what I cared about. So I was just doing what all my friends are doing. For example, I participated in HOSA, which is this med competition club, even though I knew that I didn't really want to pursue the medical field. And I think I only started to take initiative around 10th grade. So I began choosing the clubs that I was genuinely interested in. And that's also when I joined Michigan Youth Empowerment, which was a huge contributing factor into how I discovered what I was truly interested and passionate about. So this is just to any parents out there. You can't really force your kids to participate in the things that you want them to participate in and then make them care about them. It's really up to the student to find the things that they're interested in and kind of craft their own personal growth journey.
Amazing. Thank you so much, you three. I found that to be personally very inspiring. Even though I'm a junior, I know I've gone through my hurdles through, AP courses. I think that especially your time management tips were very helpful. I think that everyone can have a little bit to learn from what you guys have said. But anyways, on to our next topic. One thing I know that a lot of people who are attending our seminar tonight who are very curious about are standardized testing and high school GPA. The standardized test that I am talking about, of course, is the SAT. And some of our audience has not taken this test yet. So why don't we give them some pointers on how to study for this important test?
All right, so first we're talking about your GPA and choosing your classes to try and help that. Of course, going to be very important, but it might not be as important as you realize, and I'll talk about that in just a second. There is a difference between weighted and unweighted GPA. That weighted GPA is going to be more beneficial for you if you are taking AP classes. It means that your numbers will be a bit more inflated. For me, my normal GPA, my unweighted, is about 3.8, 3.9, and my weighted one, I think, sits around 4.2, 4.3. So it is a lot more impressive number when you use that weighted GPA. And colleges are looking at the grade and the rigor of your class. So if you are not taking a class because you think it'll be too difficult, you think it'll drop your grade, maybe reconsider, because the difficulty of the class is going to be considered by these admissions officers. They're going to look at your whole transcript and they are going to figure out if you really did push yourself and if your grades are just showing you taking safe classes, you trying to boost your GPA, or if your grade is really from hard work and really finding out where your passions are. So of course, like I mentioned before, know your limits. All right. So of course, challenge yourself, take a few more AP classes, take a few more advanced classes, but stop when you know it's going to be too much. Okay. Because you are going to have to go through 4 years of this. This is an endurance game. It's not going to be in sprints. So make sure you know where your limits are and just stay just shy of that. Right. And then also that perfect GPA isn't always going to be the best. Growth and improvement can be a better look on your transcript than that perfect GPA. What I mean by that is that if you are struggling freshman year, sophomore year, your grades are maybe around a C or a B, and you can't figure out what you're doing and all of that, and you can turn it around junior year, senior year, A's, B's, A's, that will be a very good look. Okay, because then you can write about it in your essay, talk about how you've learned certain skills, because you will learn these skills and you will improve, and that showing this improvement is going to be a way to put yourself ahead of other students in the eyes of the admissions officers.
All right, and now we just have some quick notes on your SAT and ACT preparation. So the biggest thing here is that practice makes perfect. Now, how do we practice? Now, we have a lot of different resources out there, some being Khan Academy, which offers a lot of free resources. You have test prep books such as Barron and Princeton Prep. And then you have test prep courses, like some of which you may have heard, such as Kabir. Now, for me personally, I did Kabir, and I think Angela did too. And for me, I think it was really useful because they offered a lot of different tests for you to take, different practice exams, as well as explanations for all the answers to those exams, which I found really, really helpful. Now, some more points we have here are that some colleges are test optional. Now, the policies differ from application season to application season, as well as institution to institution. So it's really important that you research this and make sure what you research is applicable to your application cycle year. And really make sure that you can use that as a gauge for whether or not you want to submit a specific test score to a given college. Another note here we have is to register early. So make sure that you're ahead of the game, right? That way you're not stressed out in the end. And also be aware of your percentile score for colleges. This can really help you make those judgment calls for test optional schools, because schools will often release data on their percentile scores for the students that they admit. For example, their 50th percentile score is the average score of a student that would be admitted to that college. And looking at your own SAT or ACT score in respect to that range is going to be helpful for you when you're making that call of whether or not you want to submit your SAT or ACT score. For me personally, I took the SAT once, and I did Kabir as a test prep course, and I scored a 1570.
Yeah, I also did Kabir, and then I took the test twice. And my biggest piece of advice for SAT or like any of these standardized tests in general is just to take a ton of practice tests. And when you're going back and grading these tests, don't only look at why you got a question wrong, but also take the time to look at the wrong answer choices and ask yourself, why is that wrong? And then why was that an option on the test? So when you actually take the time to understand why and how the questions are written, you'll be able to hopefully understand the questions a lot better on the test.
And also I want to emphasize that you guys don't necessarily have to be paying for all of these test prep courses, these prep books. They are going to help you along, but the free resources are great too. Khan Academy, you'll also find YouTube videos, articles. I mean, this is a huge test, so there's going to be a lot of resources out there to help you on it. And also, it's cheesy, but it is also very important. Make sure you guys get a good night's sleep the night before. Don't sit there and cram the night before. It's not really going to help you. All the studying you've done in the past X amount of time is what's really going to help you. And that's what help me get my 1520.
Awesome tips, guys. And on to our final topic, we will be discussing what we are all here for, college applications.
Okay, so the majority of your college applications will be submitted through the platform called the Common App. I know there are a few exceptions, MIT, University of California schools, University of Texas schools, and then just non-US schools, you won't be using this platform. But for the majority of schools, you'll be on this, so we'll kind of explain what's required. So you'll need your GPA, your senior courses, transcripts, and then you'll also be able to submit up to 5 honors or awards. Test scores, a lot of universities were test optional, so that'll be up to you. You'll take a look at the specific school's policy and decide if you want to submit SAT, ACT, APs, tests like that. The activity section, you'll be able to submit up to 10 activities, and the format for that is you'll be asked for an organization name, your position name, and then 150 characters to talk about what you did under that activity. Your personal statement, I would say, is probably your most important part. On the Common App, this is your 650-word essay, which we'll be talking about for the rest of the seminar. And then the additional information section, this one's pretty self-explanatory, just write anything else you want your admissions officer to know. I would say don't leave it blank. Think of like anything to write about. So for me, I talked a bit more about my STEM research. I put my abstract in there, and I also talked a bit more about some clubs that I weren't able to include in my activity section. And then finally, you'll submit your supplemental essays here, as well as send your recommendation letter requests.
So here is the timeline of how you should get started. This is going to be that junior year, summer, that's going to be right before senior year. So you do have work to do over the summer. Hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it is going to be good to get started. So you can postpone this, of course, but I really recommend against it, because what you can do during the summer is work on your Common App essay. All right, this is going to be that big personal statement, those 650 words, where you want to really put your heart into it and really show who you are to these admissions officers. Another thing you guys can do during the summer is create a list of colleges you guys want to apply to. I'm sure you guys already have a lot in mind, but do more research. Look at rankings, look at how other students feel about that school. I mean, it's the summer, you guys may have vacation time. Take a vacation to the campus that you want to check out. Take a campus tour, look around, see if you see yourself being there, or if it's not for you. It's really helpful going on a campus tour. It shows you exactly what you're going to be in for. For me, I found it to be very comforting too, because the whole idea was so scary to me, and it was almost kind of alien the way that I'm just applying to these schools and I don't have that physical connection. Taking a campus tour will get you that physical connection, and will also give you something to write about on your essay as you create it. Now, before school starts, you guys also want to get a list of people you guys want recommendation letters from. You want to get one from an extracurricular, that being maybe a leader of a troop or a boss or something like that. Have them write one for you, and also make sure you get, I would recommend 2 teachers. Now, I just want to say, for a lot of applications, schools are going to be requiring maybe around 1 or 2 teachers, but do get more rec letters, because the more you get, the more helpful it is going to be. Even though they say they require this amount of rec letters, they will usually take more, so having more will only help you. So look at 2 teachers that you would want rec letters from. These are teachers that maybe you've gotten close to, maybe teachers with difficult classes that you excelled in. These are people who are really going to put a good word in for you and show these admissions officers what you are all about. And then during the fall, you're going to be working on supplemental essays, which are these additional essays for each school that they ask you to write. Again, same process where you're going to be editing it and working on it as you go.
Now, something that's becoming increasingly more common is submitting applications early. And all this means is, instead of having your applications be due like end of December, beginning of January, you'll be submitting your applications around October to beginning of November. So I'll kind of talk about all of the different options for that. So early decision is the least flexible option. What this means is if you are accepted into the school, you have an obligation to go. I personally didn't choose this option because I wasn't entirely sure where I wanted to go yet, but a few examples of schools that do offer ED include Cornell, UPenn, and UChicago. Next is early action. This is the most flexible one. It's basically the same thing as regular decision. You're just submitting at an earlier time. So I know University of Michigan has this option. A lot of people do that. And then MIT and Caltech are both offering early action. And then restricted early, more complicated. This means you can only submit an early application to one private institution, but you can submit as many early applications to public institutions as you want. So I know Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, a ton of the Ivies offer this. And then rolling, this was not very common, but this basically means you have like no deadline, just students are accepted as you apply.
All right, and then we just have some few more notes on early versus regular applications and when you should apply early. Now, if you have a set dream college and you know that you want to attend this school no matter what, early decision might be a great option for you, or just applying early in general. Now, not to say that you should do this blindly just based on your feelings, because finances may also play a role in this, but I'll talk about that in a second. Now, there are many benefits to applying early application. For example, you will be pitted against a smaller application pool because not everyone is going to choose this particular institution to apply early to, especially with many of those more restrictive types of early applications. But one thing to note here is that although it's a smaller application pool, you're also going to be pitted against much more competitive applicants, just due to the fact that these applicants are going to be more interested in the school, more likely so at least, because of the fact that they're applying early. But there are also some more benefits here. So for example, there's less stress during the senior year for some schools. So this may be different for you, but apps are due in the fall. And typically during that beginning region of the school year, you're not gonna have as much on your plate. And you'll hear back early too. So it'll help you make those later decisions. Like if you got in, maybe you're not going to consider applying for other places. Like it just depends really on where you're applying, how your system works. And then lastly here, we have many schools have higher earlier acceptance rates. For example, for Cornell, since they have that early decision option, you're really going to see this greater variance for early decision versus regular applications. But their early decision rate is going to be 21.4% of applicants accepted, or something around that number. But their regular decision rate is more towards 9%. So there's definitely a big difference and advantage there that you may want to take advantage of if you can and are willing to. So when should you not apply early is if you have your current transcript and you decide that it doesn't show your academic ability to your best extent and you know you can do better, then you might want to wait until those first semester grades roll in. That way you can demonstrate to admissions officers that, hey, like I can do good. I know that I have a greater ability than what's seen before here, but look at how much I've improved. So that's definitely an option as well. Another reason may be that your essays are not ready yet. Now, if that's the case, then you might want to take a step back and be like, I want to have this admissions officer see the best in me. And honestly, this essay is not the best in me. And I know I can do better. And I think I'll have higher chances if I wait those few months to perfect this. Then that could also be a reason. Now, for early decision, this is what I was saying for financial aid. If you're not 100% about the school, you will want to compare financial aid packages, whether that be like your family may be a deciding factor in your application process. That's definitely something you want to consider before thinking, hey, do I want to apply early decision, since early decision is the most restrictive and, like Angela said, least flexible. So definitely take all these factors into account before making an early decision to apply, or just early in general. Now, some tips we have here are to pick based on your programs, not just numbers. So what we mean by this is that maybe the overall ranking for a school is higher than another. But if this other school had a better business program and you want to go into business, then you should definitely take another look at that other school, because ultimately, when you're looking at your education, you're looking at that specific program that you're going to be pursuing. So knowing that that program is going to be better than another school that may have a higher ranking overall, that's just something to take into account when you're weighing where you want to apply to. Also remember quality over quantity. So it's really easy to get burnt out if you decide that you want to apply for 20 different colleges. Now, instead of doing that, you may consider reeling it down and doing more so of a smaller range or a smaller amount than that, because having such a large amount of applications, you're going to be writing a lot of essays most likely, or just going to be doing a lot of work in general. And that will lead to a smaller, like a lot worse quality of that application, because you're not able to put forth as much effort into that. So being able to balance based on your own abilities and being able to shrink that amount to just what's really necessary for you is going to allow you to add more perfection to the applications that you will be submitting. And lastly, we want to remind you to have a good range in your applications. Now we have kind of 3 different categories here: safety, matches, and reaches. Safeties are schools that you will 99.9% chance of getting admitted into. So if you have that really, really high chance of getting admitted into it, you want to apply to a few safety schools. That way you're sure that you'll be going to a school the next following fall. And for matches, that's more so towards that middle acceptance rate of like, you have like a 40 or 50% chance of getting in. That's like a good match for you. It would be a good like match of your ability on what's been demonstrated through your application. Then you want to apply for a few of those too to give you some more options. Now, reaches are going to be like the ones that you can't guarantee you'll get into to any extent. A lot of these will be like, the Ivies, MIT, Stanford. These are going to be the ones that you want to maybe try if you have an interest in them. They could be more towards like, this is my dream school. And applying for them is going to give you just that like kind of shoot for the stars option there.
Now, one result that you can get from your applications that we haven't talked about yet is getting waitlisted. So this is something that's kind of like in between getting rejected and getting accepted. But the important thing to know is that it's not a no. So what getting waitlisted means is basically a college wants to accept you, but they just don't have enough space in their incoming class. So what they'll do is they'll give you a final decision after the decision date for the accepted students. So if there are any students that decide not to go to that institution and they have a lot of space left in their incoming class, then admissions officers will reevaluate the students that were waitlisted and offer any of the existing spots. So I was actually waitlisted from the University of Pennsylvania. So what I did to get off the wait list is, first of all, don't just sit around and do nothing. I reached out to my interviewers for those schools, and then I kind of asked them to write an additional letter of support to admissions officers telling them why I wanted to go to University of Pennsylvania. And then I also wrote a letter of continued interest, which basically was a letter telling the admissions office all of my new accomplishments that I had since submitting my original application.
So your big essay in that application is going to be that personal statement. This is going to be, of course, incredibly important, but it's also going to be limited to 650 words. Now, depending on the topic that you choose, this 650 words should go pretty quickly, whatever thing you decide to talk about. And there are a certain list of prompts that you do have to answer, but realistically, you can fit almost anything into those prompts. So you choose your topic first, what you want to write about, and then figure out what prompt that connects with later. So as you guys are choosing your topic, make sure it's something that you really connect with, because there's going to be things where maybe you want to write about, oh, this is my love of education. But is it really? Is it that you are trying to impress these colleges, or is it that you genuinely do have a passion for education? So talk about something where you can really get your personality across, your voice across. If you realize that once you finish your draft of your personal statement and you read it back, you realize that, hey, this sounds kind of cookie cutter. Hey, this sounds like I'm kind of pandering to this college. Hey, this does not sound like me at all. This is not how I would talk. This is not how I would write. Then scrap it and try again, because this is going to be that very important work. So don't be too remiss to get rid of some of those old drafts, because you want to try again and really figure out and whittle down that perfect personal statement. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about one thing too. A lot of people get stuck on the idea of, well, I'm going to tell the story of when this happened and it showed this. You can tell multiple stories too. As for me, I use the theme or the topic of the word sonder, which the definition of is the realization that every passersby is living a life as vivid and as complex as your own. So I tied that into a bunch of stories where I talked to strangers and they made me realize certain things about the world, certain things about my own life. And in that case, it wasn't just one big story, it was multiple little tidbits.
And then my personal statement was kind of about my like leadership journey. So I talked about working with a team on a project and how I realized that my personal failures were affecting how I was managing the team. So it was kind of about how I discovered what it means to be a leader. And then I also tied in like a metaphor about cooking. And then the values that I emphasized during the personal statement was creativity, being okay with failure, and taking risks.
Yeah, and my personal statement was kind of a mini story and a main one. My mini story was pertaining to a funny thing that happened with my cactus, and it was also kind of like an extended metaphor throughout my main story of helping a little kid and tutoring her for a spelling bee. Now, the main characteristics I wanted to demonstrate there were perseverance and diligence.
So now moving on to just some advice for starting your personal statements. First thing would be depth versus range. So we recommend going into detail about a specific moment rather than talking about like a super broad topic and not going into detail, because ultimately your admissions officer wants to hear about you. And you're gonna have a lot easier of a time doing that if you're going super into depth on a specific thing, and you can talk about like how you reacted or what you did and really focus more on yourself rather than the topic that you're talking about. Next is making sure the thing you're writing about and how you write is personal to you. So this isn't going to be like the essays that you write in school, like those 5-paragraph analytical essays. You really want your voice to show through as well as your personality through these essays, and kind of related that in order to have your voice show through. Don't read too many examples before you start writing, because if you use these examples as like a template, you're going to have an essay that doesn't sound too much like yourself. And then finally, I'll just jump to the last point. There are a ton of resources online that you can check out. The two websites that I love are College Essay Guide. That one gives a lot of advice for brainstorming and just structuring your essays. And then College Find has specific advice for specific schools. If you have like a dream college and you want to tailor your supplemental essays or something like that, definitely check out College Find as well as Prep Scholar. And then on YouTube, there's 2 college YouTubers that I recommend. They're Dylan Nellis and the Cath Path. And then something just to keep in mind, so take all of their advice with a grain of salt, because they're not admissions officers, so they won't know exactly what got them in. So kind of you can listen to your advice, but don't listen to like every single thing that they say.
And then we just have a few more notes pertaining to essay writing. So the first question here is, how many people should read your essay? Now, we just want to emphasize that writing is subjective. That means everyone's going to have a different opinion. And if you let too many people read your essay, it's going to get really hard being able to weigh those opinions. Now, our recommendation for that is, if you decide to have multiple people read your essays, we would weight those opinions based on who you trust and value the most to know you the best. Because these essays are supposed to show who you are, and people who know you best are less likely to crowd your voice with their opinions. And moving on to the next point and pertaining to that, make sure your voice doesn't get lost, because this essay needs to stay true to you and it needs to demonstrate your best friends to admissions officers, and it's not going to work if it's not you. Our second question is, am I satisfied? Now, our number one tip for determining if you're satisfied or not, especially if you have ideas throughout the writing process and you want to test them all out, is to make new copies for each draft instead of leaving everything on one Google Doc or document. Because making these new copies or separated by like the different ideas that you may have or different stages of a story that you may consider is being able to basically weigh what you think is best based on being able to go back and having that kind of flexibility because you made those new drafts for each stage or idea. And that will really help you throughout this entire process. And then our last question here is when to abandon an essay and start again. And our very simple piece of advice for this one is to abandon an essay when it doesn't sound like you. Because again, these essays are about you. And if it doesn't sound like you, then essentially it's pointless to what you're trying to demonstrate to these colleges.
Now, these next list of tips are specifically focused on the process of writing your essay. So the first one is don't rush into a topic that you're not sure of. So our recommendation is to keep a doc or just like on your notes app in your phone, just a list of ideas for your personal statement. And for the ideas that you feel strongly about, before you start writing your first draft, start with a brief outline, because the last thing that you want to do is start writing your draft and then realize you've committed to an essay idea that you're almost done with, but you realize it doesn't really show who you are as a person. So that's why I highly recommend you start with an outline first. Next, sometimes the more specific the moment, the more meaning it holds. So this is pretty similar to what we talked about before. Don't be scared if you don't think you have like a huge important like event to talk about. Smaller moments are fine. It's based off of how you write it and how you're able to show who you are and what you value as a person through that moment to your admissions officer. Next is avoiding fluff. So the 650 word limit is actually not that much. It's about 1.5 pages double spaced. So I've heard a lot of people say that each sentence in your personal statement should serve a purpose. So that's something you can keep in mind when you're editing your essays. Next, this tip I really love. It's reading your draft out loud, because what I realized is when you're reading what you write out loud, that's when you're really able to see any awkward transitions or awkward pauses. And then afterwards, you can go in and edit those out. And then finally, don't be afraid to have other people read that essay, whether it's your peers or a teacher that you really trust. But one thing you should be aware of is if you're letting other people read your essays, you don't always have to listen to everyone's advice, because if you're applying all of their suggestions, then you're going to end up with an essay that doesn't really sound like you.
Yeah, and then we just have some few notes on supplemental essays. So a few common supplemental essay prompts. Now, a reminder, supplemental essays are specific essays that a school may require you to write for an application. And some common prompts are why us, why this major / program, specific things pertaining to extracurriculars, your community, intellectual vitality, and leadership. Like, these are all things to look out for and be able to have like some ideas, brainstorm a little bit in advance for questions pertaining to these topics. And in relation to that, be sure to recycle essays with similar prompts, because if you're applying to 2 different colleges that both have similar essays regarding to extracurriculars or similar prompts, it's really smart for you to be able to determine that, recognize that, and reuse and recycle that essay that you've already written for one of the colleges. Because chances are you're going to be writing a lot. And when you're writing too much, you tend to get burnt out, like mentioned before, and recycling these essays is a great way for you to prevent that burnout. Our third point here is to have a template or go-to structure to save time when writing your why us essays. Now, your template or go-to structure is going to be very helpful when you're doing your research for a specific school and determining what exactly it is that makes you want to apply for this given school. Now, for example, if you value certain research opportunities, if you value connection to culture or ethnicities and stuff like that, like being able to identify what you value and focus your research and essay around that as kind of a structure or outline is going to save you a lot of time and effort. And then our last point here is to recognize or beware that most top colleges will require at least 1 to 2 supplementals. Many have more. So be aware of that and kind of plan ahead. Don't think that your common application personal statement is going to be all that you need to worry about, because you're going to be writing a lot more, especially for those top colleges.
So ultimately, your goal with your application is to be able to tell a story to your admissions officer. And the only way that this is possible is if you're able to show your identity throughout not only your essays, but also your activities. So our advice to be able to do this is to don't pursue activities or anything like that just because everyone else is doing it, because it's going to be a lot harder to stand out if your activities list is the same as everyone else in your grade. I think something that a lot of people forget is that it's going to be the same admissions officer that's going to be reading all of the applications in your school and in your area. So you really want to find a way to portray yourself as somebody that is unique and different from your peers. So that's why you really want to find activities that you're truly interested in. So for me, I really focused on social impact throughout high school. And in my application, I talked about how I wanted to use business to further my interests in social impact. So that's just an example of how you can do it.
Okay, so another thing is going to be tailoring that application, or essentially personalizing it both for yourself and for the schools. First, understand your strengths, what makes you stand out. And I mean stand out, not necessarily, again, just pandering to these admissions officers. You want to figure out what really makes you unique, what your passions are, what you really care about, what you believe in. And also for each college, do your research on them, right? So take a look at what they value. Maybe it's research, maybe it's personality, maybe it's community service. Take a look at all of their advertising, see what they really care about, and also do a little bit more of a deep dive too, but get an idea of what they're all about. You can also look at maybe some famous professors they have, some famous alumni they have, some of the history they have, and you can write about that in the supplementals as well, because another common supplemental essay is why this school in particular. So knowing all that information is really going to help you along in writing that and helping you create a stronger application. And also figure out what major you want to apply for and reorder your extracurriculars, your honors, according to that as well. So ones that match that major, you want to put higher up on your application. And also you want to be able to write about why you care about this major over another, why you have a passion towards that, and why you want to study that.
All right, so now we just have some general notes on interviews, because chances are, for especially those more prestigious schools, you're going to be participating in an interview during your application process. Now, our number one tip here is to know yourself and be your authentic self. So it may seem really intimidating because you're interviewing, but you're being interviewed by someone who is an alumni at that school. But interviews are really very nice, and they're looking for the best in you. But even through what you can tell, these interviewers are taking time out of their day to do something nice for their school. So they're pretty good people. They're very kind. And you should also know that interviews don't matter that much in your application. It's more so like an enhancement. So don't put too much pressure on yourself, because the admissions officers really do focus more on what was written beforehand and what you submitted through the Common App, supplementals, etc. And what you want to really be able to have on hand or know and recognize when you're going into these interviews is what you can bring to this college, because these alumni who are interviewing you want to make this institution better. They want to bring in students who are going to improve the school. And knowing what you can do and bring into this college is going to help boost your chances there. So another thing to keep track of is your college's interview policy. So know that, is it voluntary where you have to sign up? Is it just going to be random? Are they going to send an email to you telling you who your interviewer is, and etc.? And knowing that, in addition to keeping an eye on your email inbox, is going to ensure that you're not missing anything. So your email inbox has lots of different tabs like spam, promotions, and be sure to keep track of all of them, because a lot of times you're going to receive an email from an interviewer, and it's going to be some random email address, and then it get marked under promotions for some crazy reason. and you don't want to miss it. So be sure to keep track of everything and stay organized in that manner. Now, some more tips we have here is to practice. So, in order to relieve some of that stress and nervousness that you may be feeling, be sure to look up some common interview questions, try answering them in a mirror or having family members or friends ask you. Being able to, have some type of structured answer or idea of what you might want to say during an interview is really going to help you out. And then we have some common questions listed here, just in case you want to take a look. Now, in addition to that, you want to do tons of research about your school for your interview, because of course you want to know what you're interviewing for, right? You want to sound prepared and passionate for whatever institution it is that you applied for. And another sub-bullet here is to have 3 to 4 questions prepared to ask your interviewer. So you don't want to go in empty-handed there, because interviewers like to see that you're really passionate and you have this type of curiosity and interest in that school. And the best way to do that is to have questions prepared beforehand. And the tip here is to ask about the interviewer's experience at that given institution, because it's likely going to bring back some good memories since they're coming back to interview for the school, and it'll just lead to a nice conversation. Last tips here are to dress nicely, and for Zoom interviews, check your mic and audio, clean background, and lighting.
All right, so also just a few additional tips that we included because we didn't touch on this earlier. So each of us have learned different things throughout high school, certain tips that have helped us a lot more. For me, I found that taking the pressure in a little bit helps, turning that stress into motivation, because that stress is going to get you to do things, right? Even if it's not a particularly nice feeling, it is going to push you to finish assignments, to do better on projects and all that. So embrace it. And also, a lot of people will say that senior year classes don't really matter all that much. That's a lie. It definitely does, especially for Canadian universities. They're going to be looking at senior year grades, that senior year transcript that is going to be the most important to them. So even if you're not looking to apply for a Canadian university, still keep up your work senior year, still enroll in those advanced classes. And also, don't be comparing yourself too much. Don't be using other people as a good enough benchmark. And what I mean by that is looking at someone who may be underperforming compared to you, and you say, hey, they're doing just fine. I could probably let off a little bit. Each person is going to be different. So stay on the gas. And that also works the other way around. So don't be looking at people who are overachieving compared to you and thinking, hey, I should really pile some more stuff on. You know your limits best. So do what you think is best and not what other people are doing for themselves. Apply early when you have that opportunity to do so, because it is going to help you out a lot more. You're going to have a lot higher chance of getting into that university of your choice. And also do your research as you are looking at these colleges that you want to apply to. Like you mentioned, campus tours are really helpful. And also Rate My Professor, which you may recognize as a website to rate professors, of course. Also do have ratings for each school where students rate their experience at each university. So you can search up the university you're looking into and see what other students have to say and find out if you really think you belong there.
Yep, and then I just have a few quick points. So my first one is to know how to prioritize, because regardless of it being like, senior year or during the summer, there could still be a bunch going on. And knowing how to prioritize and best utilize your time is going to be your best friend. And then also, you should know that you can let other people give you advice, but remember, it's your choice. And this is pertaining to not only essays, but your general application process, because knowing what you're passionate about and what you want to do with your time is really going to lead to the best results there. So being able to balance advice and your own opinion is going to be key in your own success. Another point here I have is kind of similar to Jeffrey's, but don't compare yourself to others, especially during the college application season when everyone's talking about, I'm going to put this in my extracurricular section. I'm going to put this in my honor section. It can be really tough to not compare yourself to others, but you should know that you don't know the entire story of what their application looks like. So there's no way you can make a fair comparison. And not to mention, you should be confident in everything that you've accomplished and be proud of yourself as well. So that also goes with be humble though. So don't overthink things and think that, I can definitely get into the school and not try. So just be able to be confident in your own abilities and try your best altogether. My last point here is to not forget to enjoy your last year of high school. I don't mean to say that you should completely lay off college applications and not worry about it and just enjoy senior year, because that's definitely not true. But remember that you need time to recharge, because burnout is a real thing. And if you're just focused on all of this stuff pertaining to colleges and getting best grades and like everything, you're going to end out being incredibly stressed, and it's not good for you. And knowing how to recharge by enjoying that time in high school with these people that are soon going to be dispersed across the world is going to be key to your success as well.
And then finally, use college like prep sites or YouTube as advice, but don't attempt to follow everything that they say. Second, recommendation letters matter a lot more than at least I thought, because colleges like to see not only what you're saying about yourself, but what other people write or other people's opinions on you. And then finally, get comfortable with the narrative style of writing, because this isn't really a skill that you'll be taught in high school. So you'll have to take the time before you start your college essays to really get comfortable with this writing style. So my advice would be keep a journal. You can listen to like TED Talks or podcasts, as well as reading memoirs are all really great options.
All right. I know it has been a lot of information. I found everything our speakers have said to be truly inspirational. I've been just absolutely blown away listening to them. But now we will move on to our Q&A section. We have a couple of questions, and one topic I did want to touch up on really quickly that quite a few people are asking about is about the presentation itself. So unfortunately, we are unable to give the presentation to the public. Our recording of this entire Zoom meeting will be located online on our YouTube channel. So feel free to go back and listen to any parts that you missed or you want to like listen to again. But anyways, just jumping right into it. If you guys have any questions, again, please put it in the Q&A box as I start to ask a couple questions for our speakers. So the first one that I wanted to ask is, do you think you should submit your SAT score to a college, even if it is test optional? And maybe you have like, let's say the bare minimum score. What would you do with a score like that?
So my advice for that would be like, really look at those percentiles like we mentioned beforehand. So when you can get this data online really, but colleges will often publish what the profile of their admitted class looked like. And you'll be able to see what was the average SAT score of a person that they admitted. And this is really a judgment call. But if you're looking at your GPA and your overall intellectual abilities, and you're looking at that in comparison to your percentile scores that you found, it's really up to you to be able to determine, all right, this is below average and it doesn't demonstrate my intellectual abilities, then I would recommend that you don't submit it. If it's above average and it demonstrates intellectual abilities, that'd be an easy option to submit it. So really be able to make that judgment call in addition to the data that you can see online for these admitted class profiles.
Awesome. Angela, Jeffrey, would you like to add on?
No, I think just everything Jessica said is perfect.
Awesome. All right. Another quick question. Let's target it towards Jeffrey. How did you decide which school was the right fit for you and your dreams?
Okay, so I just mentioned my advice of looking at that ratemyprofessor.com ratings, and that was really important for me because I was initially looking at attending University of Toronto just because the rankings were so strong. One thing I want to emphasize is that the rankings shouldn't be everything you guys are looking at, because those rankings, it really emphasizes certain points like acceptance rate, where schools are incentivized to decrease acceptance rate. They're also incentivized to research instead of teach. So that ranking doesn't necessarily mean teaching quality or that education quality. It can be more indicative of how much research that university is putting out. So I was looking at the rankings, and University of Toronto was very strong. It was ranked next to Princeton, but I was looking at the Rate My Professor ratings, and a lot of the students on there really did not like the environment. They thought it was very harsh, and it was also a situation where to them it seemed like the university was so large that they didn't have attention to each of them, that the university just didn't care about them as a whole. So that's why I chose the University of British Columbia over that, because the students there seemed a lot more content with the university, and it's also a really nice area.
Okay, awesome, amazing. So one quick question I have just for, let's say, our freshman group who are transitioning in sophomore year. How many APs would you recommend that they take if they're also dealing with, like, let's say, sports and they want to also participate in clubs? What would you say is a good range of APs that they might consider taking during that transition of freshman to sophomore year?
I can probably start with this one. So just because I think you won't be taking like that many AP courses, both freshman and sophomore year, I would definitely not like overload your schedule. So maybe start out with one or two and kind of see like how you're handling those. Because I know freshman, sophomore year, your non-honors courses won't be like as rigorous. So this is kind of your chance just to kind of see where your abilities are and see what you can handle. But I personally would not go over two just because, like Jessica mentioned earlier, those clubs and sports are going to take up a huge amount of your time.
Awesome. Okay. Another question I have for you is, for you all, of course, is some students hire consultants to help them polish their applications. What are your thoughts on, hiring consultants? And did any of you consider hiring one, or maybe did hire one?
So I can start with this one. I did have someone look over my common application personal statement. And I think personally, it can be helpful if you're a little nervous if you're on the right track or not, which was me in my case. Like, I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing for college application essays, and having someone with experience look over it can be a good idea. But it's not very necessary because it's really just meant to be an extra resource for you. And it's really based on your own comfort level and whether or not you may get confused in the process and you want someone there for extra support. But it's definitely not something that you need to have.
Amazing. So next we have a question directed towards Angela. How did you start writing your personal research paper or your personal statement? I don't know which one they're directing towards, but what inspired you to start researching? And did you have any prior experience in the topics that you wrote about?
Yeah, I'm gonna assume this is about like specifically my STEM research. So something that definitely helped me was just because while I was just conducting research for the project in the beginning, I had read tons of research papers already. So I kind of had an idea of how they were structured and like the language and things like that. But when it actually came down to starting to write the paper, I definitely didn't do it on my own. So my dad is like a college professor, so he kind of helped me with like the specific wording and the phrasing and things like that. And I also had my robotics coach look over it and things like that. So if you're thinking of getting into writing a research paper, because the language and structure is so different from the type of thing that you'll write like in school, I would definitely recommend reaching out to an adult just to help you with formatting, language, editing, and just submitting that.
Awesome. Okay. So I have another question. Let's hit it for Jeffrey. So what are considered honors/awards, and how do you suggest obtaining them while in high school, dealing with courses, APs, things like that? How do you manage obtaining awards while also being a student, basically?
So usually, at least in my situation, it just kind of comes along with the other activities that you're doing. For example, some of the honors I had, that AP Scholar with Distinction, that's just taking those AP classes. And then also the PSAT one, it was the Merit Scholar. That one just came along with taking that PSAT. So usually it's not something that you really look out for and you're really reaching to get. But sometimes you'll have that opportunity dangled in front of you where you may want to push for an award in a certain club or a sport or something. If you do want to look out for certain things, again, using me as an example, that President's Volunteer Service Award is one where I went out of my way to look into that and then go through the process of getting that. So I don't have any definitive list of how you could look for all of these awards and all of these honors. But as you go along with your high school career, I'm sure you're going to come across a lot of them. It's just a matter of taking that initiative and pursuing them.
Amazing. My next question is one for all three of you to answer. Of course, you guys can choose who answers at what time, but it basically surrounds the idea of how many colleges to apply for. So the question is basically like, how many colleges did you apply for, and how many do you recommend to our audience?
For me personally, I applied for, I think, 9-ish colleges. And I think as for like how much you should apply for, it really depends on what the college is and the workload associated with it. Because, for example, for those Ivy Leagues and higher up colleges, they're going to have a lot more supplemental essays, and you're going to have to put forth a lot more effort into those supplemental essays to be admitted. So it really depends on what range you're choosing. But if you have like 20 safety schools that all don't require essays, you can apply for as many of those as you want. But of course, there's an application fee associated with each of them. And you can decide based on that. So really look at the level of workload associated with each of them and determine what's really necessary for you. Like, remember, have that range of safeties, matches, and reaches, and then go off from that and think what's really necessary for you, because you don't want to be spending unnecessary money or unnecessary like time and effort there. You don't want to burn out.
For me, I just wanted to add on, I agree with everything Jessica said, but I would also look at the schools you're applying early. So based off of what schools you're accepted into early, that can really determine how many more schools you want to apply to regular decision. So I think I applied to 3 schools early, and then based off of that, I kind of chose which schools I wanted to apply to. So I kind of took a few schools off of my list for regular decision. And then in the end, I applied for 13 schools. So 3 early and then 10 regular decision.
So I applied to 9, I believe. And to me, that seemed like a little much. At least some of the schools I was applying to, I was looking at it and realizing that I don't necessarily even want to go to some of those schools, that I'm just applying there because I'm curious or it's fun. Maybe not the word, but I want you guys to, when you are applying, to really analyze the colleges that you are applying for. Make sure that you do have that safety and have a few reaches, of course, but don't get too overzealous with it. Of course, that goes the other way around too. So don't just apply to maybe like 2 or 3 schools. I would say a good number to shoot for would probably be around 5, depending on your standards and what you are looking for. But you do have the option to go over. It's just making sure that going over that number of 5 is actually going to be worth it.
Awesome. So I have one more question that you guys can all answer again, which is recommendation letters. So what process did you go through to ask your teachers for recommendations? So I'll repeat it. So it was, how many teachers did you ask for recommendation letters?
All right, so I think that Harold's cutting out here, but I believe that he was asking about recommendation
teachers
letters.
And how did you prepare or demonstrate? Oh, yeah, did I cut out? I'm so
sorry.
For
recommendation letters, you'll typically ask for 2, and that means it can depend and vary from school to school, but some may prefer that you ask before the end of junior year. Others may prefer the beginning of senior year. So you got to double check with what your counselors say, as well as your teacher's preferences. But definitely you can always ask early. Like, the worst answer that you can get if it's too early is to wait until fall or something like that. But typically you're going to ask for 2. And then based on Harold, what I think Harold's question was that you're also going to have a recommendation letter from your counselor. So this one, it's an automatic recommendation letter. You don't really ask for it, at least through my experience. And they just overall give a synopsis of their understanding of you as a student. And then for me, I also had the executive director of MYE, Grace Tai, write me additional recommendation letter, and I asked that for that from her. And towards the beginning of senior year, I think it may have been near the end of summer or something like that. So just having those laid out in that general process, it's going to be around that time range.
Okay. Actually, instead of asking everyone, I might move on to another different question. And the question has to do, give me one quick second, sorry about that. Is how important is research for universities? And how impactful do you think it is on writing your application?
Oh, I just answered that one in the chat.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Oh, you just did. Okay. Well, let me pull up another one. Sorry about that. And then, oh, yes. Okay. So another one I had in mind was, other than looking for similar interests when looking for a college, was there anything, uncommon that people might not hear when looking for colleges that you guys looked for when applying to certain colleges, or even the college that you're going to be going to in the fall?
I can start, I guess. So I think for me, like one thing I knew for sure was I wanted to go out of state, so that kind of broadened the number of colleges I applied to. But also I was looking specifically because I knew I wanted to go to a program that was super interdisciplinary, meaning even though I was applying as a business major, I didn't want to only focus on business. So I was specifically looking at programs that had a lot of options for how flexible the coursework was. So even though I was a business student, I could still take classes in engineering school or like the College of Arts and Sciences, something like that. So that's just specifically one thing that I was looking for outside of just like rankings and things.
Awesome. And then I'll ask, I think we only have time. I know we are unable to get to everyone's question tonight due to the limited amount of time. But I do have one last question, which is, what themes did you guys go off of when writing your application? And how did that kind of surround the information that you kind of talked about in your application as well?
So for me, one of my main themes was curiosity. And I was able to tie that into my activities with my research internship, as well as a lot of the work I did for my IB diploma, such as my internal assessments and my extended essay, all of which are research and independent exploration based. I also focused a lot on community service, which was the work that I'd done with MYE, as well as Key Club. And then my last kind of like strand was like teaching and tutoring, which was everything that I did with work, as well as NHS, FHS, and private tutoring.
Awesome. Well, I think that is all the time we have for tonight. So thank you so much for our three panelists tonight for providing us with all of this insightful information. And thank you everyone in the audience for supporting this conference. So we have a couple of reminders, final reminders, which are, again, if you guys would like, the YouTube video will be posted containing all the information that we went through tonight. And just remember as well that the IRM conference will occur this August from the 6th to the 7th. And you're able to sign up using the QR code posted earlier, as well as I think the link is probably still in the chat. So if you scroll up a little bit, you'll be able to find the link for our registration page. And I hope to see some people there as well if you're interested. And if you'd like to be notified of future events, you can also head to our website at myebeat.com and subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll be sure to keep you updated. Again, thank you for all of the participation today, and we hope you